Hi there folks, welcome back to my channel, and this is another video on the history, folklore and mythology of Scotland. And before I get into the main body of the video itself, if you're enjoying my channel, if you're enjoying my videos, please click on that subscriber button, please click on a notification bell, leave some likes, leave some comments. And if you have any ideas for any topics that you'd like me to cover as part of this series, please just let me know in the description bar below. I'd love to hear any of your suggestions and I will try and kind of get to them as soon as I can. And for this video I'm going to be looking at a Scottish mythological creature that is probably fairly famous, especially in recent years. Because what I'm going to be talking about for this video is called the Kelpies. And essentially a kelpie in Scottish folklore and mythology is a kind of a water spirit, and it's a bit of a shapeshifter as well. And it usually, from what most people know in relation to kelpies, is that they will take the form of a horse. But they can also sometimes take the form of a human. And apparently, when they're in human form, what gives them away is that they keep their hooves. So instead of feet, they'll have horses' hooves. And the main kind of story that most people know about kelpies is that somebody will be down on the loch side or at the river side, and they'll come across this beautiful horse that appears to have no owner, and it's just standing there. And it'll sometimes have kind of like seaweed in its mane or in its tail, but that's supposed to be a bit of a kind of a giveaway that it's something's not quite right with this horse. But in the story, the person in question is too entranced by the beauty of this horse, and they go over and they'll climb onto the back of the horse and they'll try and ride it away so they can kind of have it as their own. And then they only realise they've made a mistake when it's too late, because instead of the horse kind of riding off with the owner and heading back to or riding off with the person and riding back to that person's house, the horse has other plans. The horse will start riding towards the river or the loch, and then the rider realises that they're stuck to the back of the horse, that they can't get off no matter how hard they try, because it'd be like the more they try and get off the horse, the more that they find that they're stuck to the back of the creature. And that'll be when they realise that they've been captured by a kelpie. And since 2013, the idea of the kelpie has been kind of quite famous and quite popular in Scotland, because it was back in October of 2013 that two large equine statues were revealed, and they're called the Kelpies and the Kelpies, right? So they're at the Helix Park, right? So there's part of the Forth and Clyde Canal, and I actually did a video at the Kelpies last year, and they are really striking and really beautiful. And I think they're the largest equine statues in Scotland, and they are just really striking and really beautiful, and you can see them from the motorway. So I think even when you're driving by in the motorway and you realise that they are kind of big statues, it's not until you're actually standing in front of both of these statues that you realise how big and immense they actually are. And I would definitely recommend, if you are in the Falkirk area, definitely stop off at the Helix Park and visit the Kelpies. It's definitely worth kind of going in, having a wee wander around the Helix Park and going up and seeing them. And with it, it's like the whole story about the Kelpies is one of those other stories that I do actually find kind of really interesting, and kind of it's one of the quite the dark kind of Scottish folk tales. I think, well, mind you, I think most Scottish folk tales and folk stories and pieces of myth are quite dark and kind of quite gruesome in some ways, and I don't know what that says about Scots, that most of the folklore and mythology is kind of dark and twisted. But maybe that's kind of is our way of kind of coping with the dark nights in winter, and we're all having to huddle around the fire and keep ourselves warmed and entertained. Maybe we could kind of learn a lesson for that in relation to this whole time of lockdown and isolation. But another thing that I find quite interesting in relation to stories about Kelpies, is that it appears that most bodies of water, like most lochs and most rivers in Scotland, seem to have their own kelpie or kelpies, and which I kind of find kind of quite interesting. And I think probably the most famous one at the kind of probably the most famous story that people have tried to connect or associate with the story of Kelpies is that of Loch Ness and the Loch Ness Monster, because it is mentioned in the life, in a book called The Life of St. Columba, and there's a story mentioned in there that Columba essentially confronts a water spirit in the River Ness, and it has been argued that this water spirit is the Loch Ness Monster, and others have said that it's actually the Kelpie for that area. And there's been others who've tried to kind of try and say that the water spirit or the Kelpie and the Loch Ness Monster are essentially the same thing, and that what people have been seeing in the loch is the Kelpie. And so that's kind of something that kind of could be looked at more, maybe. Kind of, maybe there's a novel in there somewhere. Oh, mind you, I actually think there's a movie kind of based on that came out based on that premise. And yeah, so again, it's like with folklore and mythology, you never really know. There's always kind of going to be maybe kind of some layer of overlap somewhere. And has been argued that with the stories about Kelpies, that they kind of originated in the whole kind of sacrification, the sacrifice of people to kind of water deities. Because I think kind of it might be kind of, because I know that in an archaeological sense, down in the Fens, which is kind of in England, down kind of towards Cambridge, there were a lot of sacrificial objects found, like kind of swords, mirrors, kind of jewellery, kind of things that people have left as offerings kind of in the water. And I'm not too sure how common it was to sacrifice humans in watery kind of environments, but I know that that you do something that sometimes there have been bog bodies found. So maybe it has been argued that might be an origin for kind of why human remains have been found in lochs or in rivers, that people have kind of found these human remains and have came up with a story about Kelpies. But it's also been argued that, and I think this is the kind of the interpretation that I tend to go with, that the whole idea of kelpies and kind of malicious water spirits who could take you into the water and drown you was essentially a way of keeping children away from dangerous bodies of water. It's essentially a kind of boogeyman story. That's the way that I've always interpreted it as being. That essentially it was to stop children from going in, because we all know what people are like. In the summer, when the weather's hot, you want to go swimming, and you still find people who will go into like Loch Lomond or any of the other lochs and try and go for a swim. And it can be very dangerous, especially when there can be very strong currents that you may not realise are there. And I think that's kind of the way I've always kind of seen stories about the Kelpies. Essentially it was to try and stop children from going down to the loch or the river and going for a swim, especially by themselves. But then again, with things like folklore and mythology, there's always room for interpretation, there's always room for kind of looking at things in a different way. And yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the things that's always kind of really interesting about it as well. It's not necessarily always the story. Okay, the story is part of it, but it is how people interpret and look at the stories and kind of try and kind of maybe look at the origins, or kind of maybe kind of try and kind of present it in a more modern way. Like, that's kind of one of the things that kind of really draws me to mythology and folklore, because it's always evolving, it's always changing, and that's what makes it so fun. So I'm going to try and kind of stop now, kind of sign off just now before I really start to waffle and kind of start making no sense whatsoever. So hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye bye.